So they have these grubs, they're called Witchy Grubs. They have to dig down about 4 feet under a specific type of tree out in the bush. And then they crack open the roots of the tree, and then there's these grubs that are about this long and about this thick around. But they taste basically like scrambled eggs. So that was a really surprising but tasty food that they had there. I had this opportunity to live in an Aboriginal community for 17 months actually, and kind of do what the Aboriginal people did in Central Australia, and we got to actually go hunting with them and live with them and do a lot of the things they did. So I got to try kangaroo. Almost every day we ate kangaroo, and then emu, tons of different types of lizards. They eat grubs, ants, things like that. I ate emu and camel. So all of those things, I actually really enjoyed all of them. They were super good, and they cook them the traditional way on an underground oven, and it was really tasty. So the best way I can describe kangaroo is kind of a greasy mutton flavor. So it's an interesting flavor, it's its own flavor, but it's really greasy depending on the different body parts of the kangaroo that you eat. So their favorite thing, the Aboriginal people in the community that I lived in, they love the tail. So they always get the tails from the grocery store, and then they'll cook them underground, and then you just bite it in the little sections that they cut off. So I was able to actually live with the Aboriginal people and learn a lot about their culture and what they do, even learn some of their language. And for the most part of that, we slept in a tent out in the outback. So it's just kind of give a demographic or range of where this is. I served in Alice Springs, and then outside of Alice Springs are all these bush communities where the Aboriginal people live. So it's kind of like 5 hours from the middle of nowhere in the very middle of Australia. And it's super hot, and if you think of Australia, you've never been there before, it's exactly what it looks like there. Like red dirt everywhere, really flat in a lot of places, and you see a lot of kangaroos and dingoes almost every day you see them there. But I got to live in a tent and do what they do, and basically live like them. It was a really amazing experience that I really enjoyed out there, getting to know those people and seeing a completely different side of Australia than most people know about. I mean, out in the bush communities, there's kind of a joke about all the dogs that live out there. Like a lot of other smaller third world countries, even though Australia is not third world, once you get out into the bush, it's a whole different, almost like a different country, a different place. But there's dogs that run rampant everywhere. I remember one time, they don't eat the dogs there, but I remember one time, one of the ladies in the community, her dog had died. So she asked us if we would go bury it. And then I remember on our way to bury it, I accidentally hit another dog and killed that one as well. So I actually ended up burying 2 dogs that day. But then that night, one of the other dogs gave birth to 7 puppies. So I mean, we didn't lose any. It was still a net positive of puppies in the community. So it was always interesting with the dogs and how many there were, and they just run rampant kind of everywhere. I remember one time I got a package from my family, and they live here in America, and they had sent me some American food. So I had Cheez-Its, so it's just a cheesy cracker kind of thing that they sent to me. And me and my friend, we were walking down a path outside trying to talk to people. But on the side of the hill up above us, we saw a kangaroo up there. And I had these Cheez-Its in my bag, so I wanted to see if I could feed the kangaroo, if it would come down and eat the Cheez-Its. And so I threw some up the hill at it, and amazingly, the kangaroo did come down, but it didn't eat the Cheez-Its. But then all these people came up and asked what we were doing, and we ended up making like 10 different friends because they saw us trying to feed the kangaroos and wondered what we were doing. So it was pretty funny. So in that same area, it doesn't rain very often. Out of the first year that I was there, I probably only saw it rain 3 times. And it's kind of funny because in that same area, they have a river. It's called the Todd River. But it actually only has water in it once every like 5 years. It doesn't flow very often. So they've kind of made a joke out of it in that community in Alice Springs. Every year they have a river race. But everyone makes these fake boats that they stand up in, and then they run in the dry riverbed out in the sand. And actually, as missionaries, we were allowed to compete in it, and we actually took 1st and 2nd place 2 years in a row. So it's pretty impressive. So where I lived in Australia, it's the very middle of Australia, and it's surrounded by 3 really big deserts. And I think the coldest I ever felt was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be like 15 degrees Celsius. And then the hottest that I ever felt was 126 degrees Fahrenheit. So there was like 3 months straight where it was always over 110 degrees. And then even at nighttime, it only cools down to like 90 degrees. So you just get used to like always sweating. But when I came back to America, my family made fun of me because I asked them to turn the aircon off in the car. I got too cold in the car. And that's still something I've tried to adjust back to, is the weather. I think it's too cold over here. I really miss the heat in Australia. And then the other thing I really love just about Australia, about the culture, is how diverse it is. I mean, I met people from tons of different countries that all come to Australia, and they're Australian too. That's what's really cool, is that it's not just one type of person that makes up Australians. They're from all over, and they really love and accept each other as Australians. I flew from Brisbane all the way back to LA, and when I got into LA, I heard people announcing stuff, and I was like, is that how Americans sound? I sound awful. I hope I don't sound like that. But I really miss the accent and the way that people talk over there. They have no meat pies here, which is really disappointing. If you've had KFC in America, it's disgusting. Don't ever do it. But KFC in Australia, it's honestly the best thing ever. We smash the KFC all the time, had some mean-ass feeds over there. And then people would always buy us KFC too, but it's like a different menu. They have like wraps and burgers and different things, and it's like the top end of the restaurant chain over there. You always have to get the KFC in Australia. A funny thing is they call McDonald's, they call it Macca's. So if you're gonna go eat McDonald's, and you say you're going for a Macca's run, and then you go get it. And it's like, it's good food too. It's not like here where it's cheap American food. As far as classic Australian food goes though, I loved meat pies, loved sausage rolls. A lot of bakery foods that we don't have here in America, I really enjoyed those things. They have pavlova, obviously, is a famous Australian dessert. Lamingtons, which is just like cake covered in chocolate and coconut. It's delicious. And then I also really enjoyed Vegemite rolls. So they look like cinnamon rolls, but it's with Vegemite and cheese, and it's delicious. So Vegemite is kind of like a spread. They put it on toast and a lot of bread and things like that in Australia. But it's made out of like fermented yeast, basically. So it's super salty, but you have to have an acquired taste for it. And some people like it, some don't. So one thing that they have there in Australia, they call it AFL, or the Australian Football League. And it's kind of like their own sport that they play over there. I'd never even heard of it until I've been there. But it's the best way I can describe it is a mix between like football, soccer, and rugby all combined. And then it's a massive thing there. Depending on what city you're from, you have your teams. I would definitely have to go for the Crows, Adelaide Crows. But it's really funny to watch how serious people get about this sport. No matter what city you're from, you have to have a team. And if you're not on that team, or if you don't support that team, then you don't talk to people. So one of the places I lived there in Australia was a city called Adelaide, and they have 2 AFL teams there. And if you're a Port Power fan, then you don't talk to the Crows fans. It's really kind of funny, the rivalry that they have between AFL teams. Over here in America, we say, like, we have this Australian saying where throw another shrimp on the barbie, or something like that. But actually, that's just an American thing. They actually don't say shrimp over there. They call them prawns. So that's another thing. If you ever hear that in America, then you know it's just a fake thing. It's actually prawns on the barbie. So that's just a fun fact. So one of the really cool things about Australia is the indigenous culture, the indigenous tribes they have there. So there's actually over 1,000 different dialects or groups of native indigenous Australians throughout Australia. And then I got to live in the very middle, and just in that central region, there's about 10 different tribes or groups of people out there. So the main tribe that I lived with, their group of people, was the Eastern Aranda people. They have their own dream time. So dream time for them is kind of like their religion or their beliefs. And they believe in sacred ancestors that created the earth and are present in their culture or the habitat around them. And they're very respectful of the animals and of their history. And it's a really beautiful culture that they have there. One thing that I really love about Australians, first of all, is their love for family. They're super oriented in family, and they always are having family gatherings. There's always an excuse to party, it seems like, which is I think it's a really awesome thing. that there's always so much time to spend together and to do things together. So in the places that I lived, it was really common to meet people from Sudan, South Sudan, Ghana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then a ton of places in Asia, Malaysia, China, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, and then tons of Pacific Islanders as well. So like Tonga, Samoa, New Zealand, Cook Islands, Tuvalu, Tokelau, places from all over the place that you can imagine. And it was one of the coolest things because I grew up in America in a pretty small farm town where there wasn't much of that. So to go there and to see all those people living in the same place and working together, it was really amazing. As far as differences go, I mean, because it's kind of a European country, it was colonized by British people, there's a lot of similarities to America in the culture, but a lot of the stores are different, they sell different things, they drive on the left side of the road, their accent's really, really cool. And then also the seasons, like it was really weird going to Australia and it being, when it's Christmas time, I'm used to like 3 feet of snow, and going there, that's the hottest time of the year. And everyone goes to the beach on Christmas Day or on Boxing Day, so that was really interesting to go over there and to be in a completely flip-flopped climate. It depends where you go in Australia, but generally transportation seems to be a lot of buses, a lot of trains, and then people walk a lot too. Pretty similar, but definitely they have a lot more buses than I've seen here in America. Well, a lot of the foods that I like Milo, like even corned beef, those are things that are not very common here, but they're cheap over in Australia, and things like that. I miss those a lot. Tim Tams, a lot of the food. It depends on the place that you're at in Australia, but if you're in the central part, it stays pretty warm throughout the whole year. And then if you're at the top of Australia, that's where it's really tropical. And they actually don't even have 4 seasons. They just have a dry season and a wet season. So during the wet season, it gets like 100% humidity and super, super hot. So it's kind of a crazy transition. But then if you go to the south part of Australia, like Victoria or even in Adelaide, they have cooler weather. And they actually have some places that it snows, but it's really rare to find places that it snows in Australia. When I first arrived, they were super nice to me. They kind of could tell that I stood out because of my accent, the way that I talked, things like that, but they're willing to help you through those things. They're very loving people in Australia. I absolutely really loved Australia. I loved my time there. I love the people that I met. And honestly, the hardest part about living in Australia was the time that I had to leave. I was super sad to leave and to have to go back to my life in America. Not that it's bad here, but I really grew to enjoy the culture, the customs, and the people there especially. I feel like I left my family there. It meant a lot to me to get to know those people.